I've done some travel recently and I've noticed some differences between New Zealand etiquette and etiquette of other countries. So I thought I'd just make a quick video explaining some of the differences that New Zealand might have to your country if you're looking at coming to New Zealand. Just a couple little pointers that you might want to be aware of. I'm just going to go through traveling around the country, um, your interactions with people on personal levels and professional levels if you're in a shop or something similar. That's pretty much the video in a nutshell. I'm not looking at talking about how we call ourselves Kiwis and we all wear black and stuff like that. Firstly, travelling around the country, there's a couple different ways you can do that. When you arrive in New Zealand, you might get yourself a private vehicle, you might rent yourself a car. Obviously in New Zealand we drive on the left hand side of the road, so if you come from a country where you drive on the right hand side of the road, it might be a little bit of a scary change. We do have road rules here in New Zealand and we do abide by them, so you probably want to familiarise yourself with them. In general, when you're driving around, I would say that we're not overly courteous. For example, if you're on the motorway and you want to take an off-ramp, you flick on your indicator because you're in the centre lane, you need to merge into the left so you can get to the off-ramp. Don't expect people in the left-hand lane to stop suddenly for you and let you in. You might want to sort of start that merging process when you're 700 meters away from the off-ramp, because chances are there'll be a few cars that will whiz by you before you get a gap to actually make that merge. But we're not overly rude either. We're kind of in the middle. For example, in New Zealand it would be considered really rude to honk your horn or beep your horn at another motorist for no reason, or you should have a good reason to do so. Like, there's going to be an accident and you think, hey, if I honk my horn or alert that driver, and there won't be an accident, as opposed to other countries where you honk your horn for just the fact that you're driving on the road and there's another car on the road, which is what I experienced when I was in Israel. They honk their horn at people all the time for the smallest reasons, and you just wouldn't do that here in NZ. I noticed in other countries people are always on their cell phones. In New Zealand it is an offence to use your cell phone while driving. I would recommend that you don't. It's just got a bad look to it. I think one of the more scarier things for a tourist in a foreign country is the idea of getting pulled over by a policeman. If you do get pulled over by a policeman here in New Zealand, it's probably just a routine stop. They won't ask you to do anything that they don't have the power to do, i.e. ask you for your details, ask you to produce a driver's license. They have the power to do that. If at any point in time you get confused, you can just say to him, why are you doing this? And I'd say 9 times out of 10 they would be more than willing to explain to you why they're asking you for your particulars. I'd just say the best thing to do is just be cool, and I'm sure the policeman will be cool as well and you won't have any problems. If you're not looking at hiring out a private vehicle, you might be looking at using public transport. Public transport in New Zealand is okay. A lot of the services run up until kind of late, maybe like 10:30 at night. I think most trains stop at 10:30 at night, and then buses probably stop around midnight. There's a real good website, maxx.co.nz. You can use this website to see all the timetables. There's a journey plan on the website, so you can type in where you are and where you want to go, and it will tell you how to get there. It'll give you a number of different options. It'll tell you the pricing. Here in Auckland, where I live, they have something called an AT hop card. So if you are going to come to New Zealand just for a week, or maybe you're going to be in New Zealand for a while but you don't really plan on using public transport that often, you could probably just pay casually. You hop on the bus, pay the driver just a casual rate, and that will work out to be relatively cheap. But if you're going to be in the country for a longer period of time, you will probably want to look at getting what they call a hop card, which lets you use public transport at a discounted rate. To use the card, you must swipe it on a sensor by the train station, and that tells the card, I'm going to catch a train from here. And then when you get off the train at the next stop, you swipe the card again, and then it says I've finished my journey at this point, and then it will calculate how much it should charge you for that service, and it will deduct that from your card. Using a taxi in New Zealand would be your last resort, because I haven't used a taxi in a long time, but it's going to be at least 8 times as expensive as it would be using public transport. We do have Uber in New Zealand, so if you've got the Uber app on your phone, you're more than welcome to use that. My understanding is that Uber usually operates at about 2/3 the cost of a taxi. And then there's just walking. It's pretty safe to walk around New Zealand. I would say that the only big difference from walking, especially when it comes to crossing the roads in New Zealand compared to other countries, is that the pedestrian crossings actually are there for a reason in New Zealand. Other countries, you go to cross at a pedestrian crossing and traffic doesn't stop for you. In New Zealand, you go to a pedestrian crossing and traffic will stop for you, as long as you use the pedestrian crossing. I guess we'll talk about interacting with people for a little bit. So when it comes to interacting with people on a professional level, i.e. going to a store and you're buying something, I would say that New Zealanders are not overly polite, but we're not overly rude either. We're kind of in the middle once again. So it's quite normal to walk into a store and you have your items, you walk up to the counter and you're ready to make your transaction, purchase the item, and the cashier will be joking around with their buddy, and you just kind of stand there and wait for 5 seconds and then they'll turn and they'll address you. So we're not super formal here where we bend over backwards for the customers, but once again we're not going to be really rude to you either. When it comes to paying for your purchase, some countries they want the exact amount of money if you're going to be paying in cash. In New Zealand it doesn't really matter that much, but if you're going to buy something that's $19.50, probably best to just put more than what it's worth down on the table. So buying something that's $19.50, throw down a $20 note, and they'll give you 50 cents change, no worries. As opposed to other countries where you're buying something for $19.50 and they want exactly $19.50, and if you don't give them $19.50, you give them a 20, they kind of shake their heads and grumble. You won't find that here in NZ. And in New Zealand we don't tip. It's really, really uncommon to tip. So people who get tipped in New Zealand are predominantly girls. So guys pretty much never get tipped for any service. It doesn't matter if you're a waiter, working in hospitality, anything, getting a tip is very, very rare. I worked in hospitality for about 12 years and I probably got tipped twice. So we don't expect it, so don't worry about tipping people. Quite often you go to tip someone in New Zealand, they kind of just stare at you and they stare at the money and it doesn't actually register in their mind that they're getting money for free for just doing their job. I mean, their job pays them wages, so they don't need an extra $10 from you or whatever. So interacting with people on a more personal level, I guess it really depends where you are in New Zealand. but in some parts of New Zealand there is a strong Pacific Island influence, and in most Pacific Island cultures it's actually rude to have direct eye contact. So sometimes you will shake hands with someone and they won't look you in the eye, and that's them showing respect, because it's considered rude to look someone who's senior to you directly in the eye. And that doesn't apply to everyone. There will be some people who have direct eye contact. So you'll probably find a mix depending on whom you're talking to and what part of the country you're in. Like I've kind of stated before, we're a bit casual, so it's more than alright to talk to someone for a bit before you introduce yourself. It's not like in other countries where you meet someone for the first time, you would have to introduce yourself, say, hello, my name is blah blah blah, and then you can talk to them. You could talk to someone for 5 minutes and then say to them, oh, by the way, what's your name? That's perfectly fine. If you go into someone's house and you're wondering, do I take my shoes off when I enter their house, it's kind of a 50-50 split here in New Zealand. Some people do it, some people don't. Best thing to do is just ask, because quite often you'll go to enter someone's house and there will be a shoe rack by the door, and you think to yourself, oh, there's a shoe rack, I'll take my shoes off. You start to take your shoes off and your host will say, hey, don't worry about that. And he will tell you don't worry about that because he only expects his family members to put their shoes on the shoe rack, and guests can walk around the house with their shoes on. Some New Zealanders will have a cultural quirk where we don't like things being placed on the dinner table that don't have anything to do with eating. So the dinner table in some households is considered a place for eating and nothing else. So you wouldn't take your hat off and put your hat on the dinner table. It's also pretty uncommon for Kiwis to wear their hats inside for anything. So for example, if you're looking at going out on the town in New Zealand and you're wearing a baseball cap or any kind of hat, chances are you won't be allowed to enter the bar, because it's just a custom that we don't wear hats inside. Depending on where you're going, there are some places in New Zealand that getting into a bar is quite difficult for a guy. For a girl, as long as you're dressed nicely, that's fine, you can get in. For a guy, some bars will have a strong dress code where you're not allowed to wear a hat, you have to wear a collared shirt, and you have to be wearing black shoes. Now it sounds pretty strict, but here in Auckland it's quite common. A lot of the bars have those 3 basic rules. So don't go out onto town wearing a baseball cap and sneakers and expect to be able to get into every club, because a lot of them will bounce you. I'd say that most Kiwis have a pretty good attitude to foreigners who are travelling New Zealand. If you get lost and you're asking someone for directions, if you're trying to find some place that's like a tourist attraction, I'd say pretty much the average Kiwi will be more than happy to give you directions and help you out in whatever way they can. And they'll probably just ask you, hey, where are you from, and are you enjoying the country, and that kind of thing. Because tourism in New Zealand is kind of a big deal, and we want to make sure that people who come to the country enjoy it. And we also understand that New Zealand's kind of a small country at the bottom of the world, and we kind of get excited when people from outside the country take an interest in it. Finally, I'd say the only real word that you have to worry about learning that's in Te Reo, which is the Māori language, which is like the native Aboriginal people of New Zealand, would be kia ora, and it just means hello. But you'll hear people saying it all the time, and if you can learn that and say it to people every now and then, they'll be impressed with you. Well, that's pretty much it. Please leave a comment if there's anything that you want me to go over. I'll check this video on YouTube every now and then, and I'll look at the comments, and if need be, I'll put out another video if there's anything that you want me to address.